So I grew up in the church. My dad is a Presbyterian pastor, and the church was like a second home to me. In my early years, this meant I had like 100 doting grandmas, which was pretty cool. But it didn't take long for me to start noticing who was actually welcomed there and who wasn't. It became apparent that I fit a lot better with the people who weren't. They felt more real, more authentic than the highly produced version of worship we went to and the heavily coiffed people who showed up. People in those places often said that the church wasn't a building, that it was people. That it was more about how we functioned outside the building than how we functioned inside. That the real point of the whole thing was to be the kind of person that Jesus taught about, including all the grace for mistakes part. But I wasn't seeing that reflected in stuffy Sunday school rooms or budget meetings or leave it to beaver families with painted on smiles. There's this great passage in the Message version of the Bible. It says that God became flesh and moved into the neighborhood. Moving into the neighborhood is not bulldozing it and building a shiny, perfect one. It's not taking over and curtailing the whole thing to be aligned with your ideas. It's certainly not kicking others out of the neighborhood. Instead, usually, it's about learning how things are done in your new neighborhood, meeting people, finding the good walking loop, figuring out the luminaries at Christmas. It's about listening and learning and loving first. And then, if you see places of need or concern, doing something about it. Not just social media shaming or something like that, but really doing something about it. Engaging others and addressing what needs some love in your neighborhood. Maybe doing it over a meal. Something like that sounded a lot more like what church should be. I mean, if it's going to hold on to this whole Jesus idea. But how? What would it look like? Where could I find it? Could we just make it? Why not? I mean, Jesus basically had like 12 people that were his main crew, right? And after about a year of listening and dreaming, we had 16 gathered in my kitchen 4 years ago, almost to the day, batting around this whole Jesus idea. So we need to connect with a variety of ways that people experience goodness or godness. Like when people get into a sport or a workout and they go past the place where it's just about exercise and it becomes something more. That place where physical connects with spirit. Or like when a conversation becomes a deep connection, a deep discussion. The place where intellect connects with spirit. Of course, it would have to be spiritual too, but like encompassing a lot of spiritual practices instead of just one kind. And really, there's no point in doing it at all unless there's a component of doing good out in the world, of serving others. And that's when it all came together. Scripture has 27 places where it says in some variety to love God with your heart, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love, the source of all goodness, love and peace through your physical, cerebral, and spiritual self, and love others. That's the church we want it to be. Of course, most people thought it couldn't be done. It was too varied. And how would you come up with the ideas for all these expressions? And where will you meet? And how will you communicate? Friends, it hasn't always been easy or pretty or perfectly executed. But you already knew that. But nevertheless, we are persisting. And most of you here have a story of why that has mattered. And for me, I hold on to a deep conviction that our efforts have spiritual ripple effects, both in each of us who has gathered and in our community, and dare I be so bold as to say the world. This is our origin story, but it's based in a story far older, a story of a radical rabbi who said the status quo wasn't good enough, who said that faith had gotten stagnant, and he would wander around telling people about another way that it could be, who would point to the people who were left out of the religious structures and create space for them at the table. And that table would be the way he would encourage them, never to forget, to regularly come around a table with intention, even when things look dark, maybe especially when things look dark, and break bread together, to give thanks for all that is good and right and true and hope, and to break the bread and share it, and to pour the wine and sip it. Not because we ignore all that is still bad and wrong and lies and despair, but in spite of it. We will break our bread and drink our wine as an intentional and dramatic act of resistance in the face of it. And we will use it to fuel who we are called to be in this world. We will use this act of resistance, this bread, this wine, to remember the acts of resistance of a 2,000-year-old radical rabbi, and our own acts of resistance lived out through loving with our hearts, our mind, our strength, and loving our neighbors as we love ourselves. Take and eat. Do this in remembrance of him and as a call to be more of you. When Jesus sat around the table with his friends, not unlike all of you sitting around tables, he took some bread and he blessed it, being grateful for all that they had received, for all the love, for all each of them were, and he broke it and said, "This is my body broken for you." In a similar way, he took some wine and he poured it out for his friends. He said, "Nothing is more important than this mission of love and hope and goodness. Nothing is more important than sharing the good news and being part of the good news, even if it means shedding his own blood." I'll invite you to come forward and have some bread and some juice and remember a meal that took place thousands of years ago, but also remember a touch point of the experiences that we've had as missing piece, and we've attempted to live out in the world the love we've experienced and the gratitude we've shown. So as you feel ready, come forward.